Hello everybody, welcome back to part 2 of the French and Indian video review lecture. So, today we are following along on the same outline, French and Indian war outline, but we are talking about Proclamation of 1763. This is where we're starting, if you're following along with us. The British victory opened new territory for exploration and expansion, but it also brought the responsibility of overseeing 3 troublesome groups. The first were thousands of resentful former French subjects. French settlements remained in Canada, and even today the French are a prominent minority in Quebec and Montreal. To keep the settlements under control, the British maintained a close watch and employed harsh tactics to quell the rebellion. One tactic was mass deportation of former French colonists. One group, the Acadians, left New France and settled in Louisiana, particularly around New Orleans, so we have some Cajun around us. Over time, the name Acadian was considered to the now familiar Cajun. There's lots of Cajuns living around us, can't you tell? France's Native American allies were Britain's second problem. So their first group was French settlements. Second group was France's Native Americans that were allies. No, the Native Americans that were France's allies. With Britain's victory in the French and Indian War, the Indian supporters of the French were now in a precarious position. The French were no longer able to back their Indian allies, which left tribes such as the Huron out of an increasingly British-dominated power and trade network. While the French tended to develop trade and mission connections with local tribes, the British colonial authorities were much more inclined to remove indigenous peoples altogether and clear the land for white settlements. Some tribes feared that the influx of British colonists would result in their eventual removal from the land. So that was their second problem, their fear of because France is no longer in North America. So the Indians that backed France were kind of worried, right? Because you have this superpower that you just fought against as your powerful neighbor, sort of say. The colonists marching forward onto his people's land, Chief Pontiac of the Anglican-speaking Ottawa tribe led a bloody rebellion that resulted in the deaths of thousands of soldiers and settlers. The Ottawa besieged all but 3 of the British forts west of the Appalachian. The British countered by giving smallpox-infected blankets and handkerchiefs to the Indians. The disease swept through the Indian tribes and decimated their forces. The British regained the upper hand, but nonetheless realized the need to cooperate peacefully with the Indians to prevent further turmoil. So the British finally agreed that, yeah, we do need to get along in some parts with our neighbors, which were the Indians. So they need to get along with each other. The third troublesome group was the British colonists, who were beginning to test the boundaries of Britain's rule and were becoming increasingly aggressive towards the natives. In an attempt to maintain the situation until a peaceful resolution could be reached, London's government issued the Proclamation of 1763, which called for a halt to westward expansion beyond the Appalachians. So, hold up, we have the Proclamation of 1763 now. We are, ladies and gentlemen, we have started the road to the revolution with the Proclamation of 1763. When we do look at the timeline towards the revolution, this was the first event. This was the first event of a downward spiral that led Americans to rebel against the British government. So the Proclamation of 1763 prevented westward expansion towards the Pacific Ocean, westward expansion past the Appalachian Mountains. The Proclamation of 1763 surfaced some resentment harbored by the colonists as a result of the French and Indian War. The colonists who fought alongside their British counterparts viewed the Brits as overly and unnecessarily formal. The colonists preferred Indian-style guerrilla tactics, while the British favored organized entry into battle. Colonists in New England also resented having to quarter British troops in their homes during the war, and Britain's attempts to tax the colonists to pay for Britain's wartime support angered the colonists. So, the reason why the Proclamation of 1763 was the beginning of the road to revolution was the fact that the colonists hated Britain's tactics to win the war. Plus, Britain is footing the bill towards the colonists through taxes to pay for the war. In addition, Britain's authoritarian rule over Canada brought deep concerns to the settlers. The loss of liberties in Canada, such as the right to trial by jury, raised fears among the colonists that the Crown might impose this similar rule in New England. To the British, the end of the French and Indian War was a costly victory, but one that opened the North American continent to their total control and development. To the colonists, the war was one of the first signs that they were not just transplanted Englishmen. They were a society with their own tradition, customs, and identity that was instinctively distinct from their mother country. They also had reached, they had the resources to handle some of their own affairs without looking to Britain for support. So the colonists are looking, their identity is being shaped, and they are realizing that they may not need Britain to support them for much longer. At one time, the British government was an important source of support and protection for the colonies. Increasingly, the British government was perceived as a nuisance whose demands for taxes became symbolic of an increasingly irrelevant colonial authority. So we are there, guys. We are there to the road to revolution. We are there at the start of American history. I cannot wait for what next video will bring. The next outline is imperial reorganization, and we are talking about steps towards the revolution. See you guys next time.